I'm going to go into my DIY folder. I'm going to go ahead and just use create. Oops. Create React app. Let's call this suggestions.
Specific.
Yes.
Oh, for sure. Hmm?
For sure.
Really?
Oh.
So
No, that was a delayed reaction.
good. Oh gosh, what is the username? Do you know the username for this computer and the password?
Which user are you on?
Right now I'm under guest, but the other one was the Iron Yard.
Yes, the password is just the Wi-Fi password, Station House 300.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we're in our Pacific app. I'm gonna pop it up in Atom. I am going to open up Chrome. There we go, and get a little side by side here. I'm also going to pop open a terminal here in Atom so that we can just yarn start our app from right here. Actually, before I start that, let me yarn add React router DOM. So that way we can.
Are we still supposed to be using Phantom instead of
Fancy term?
Chrome?
Chrome.
Canary.
Chrome Canary.
Oh, no, yeah. The only reason y'all had to use Chrome Canary was that one day remind me what it was.
Classes.
When we were doing, when we first started doing classes, they were having you run the tests in the browser, but the regular Chrome didn't support that yet without transpiling. One of the things that Create React App is doing under the hood for you when you run yarn start and yarn deploy, it's actually transpiling your code into browser compatible code, so you don't need to use Canary anymore. If you want to, you can, but it does end up biting me sometimes when I work on stuff. And that is not what the app is serving. I promise. That's my app from this weekend.
Yeah.
That's So in case you all were wondering what this register service worker does, this is literally what it does. A copy of my app is cached on localhost 3000 from the previous app I was working on. Because of this, that's what the register service worker does. It makes it so the app loads immediately, even without a connection to the app itself, like because the code is cached. And then it should be updating. Why, when I refresh here, it's not picking up the other thing? But, oh, there it goes. There it went. It just took a second. So, cool. Going to keep these open. I'm going to turn off mobile mode. Okay. So that's what the register service worker does. It's beneficial, but if you want to leave it in, you can leave it in. If not, not. So let's answer the general kind of questions a little bit first, and then we'll move into back into the React router stuff. So I'm going to give an example of mapping some components. So let's go here into app component. Let's make a new folder, and we're going to make it called components. This is a pretty common practice. I'm almost kind of sad that Create React App doesn't just do this out of the gate, but actually put our components in here. I usually like to make a folder for my style sheets as well. You could, and this kind of comes to this question here of CSS best practices. I'm going to leave the CSS alone and come back to that. So here's our app. It's in there. So the index.js is freaking out because this moved. So we moved it into the components folder. So we're going to save it here. And it can't find the SVG logo anymore because that's up a directory. And so is that CSS. There we are. We're back to square one. So what I'm actually going to do is get rid of the app.css and the the logo. So we can kind of start from a clean slate here. I'm just going to have a div here that says hi. And I'm going to delete this CSS file. I'm going to delete this logo too. So there we are. We're just saying hi. No big deal. Okay. So instead of doing that, let's make a fan page for the Pacific Ocean. All right. So probably. Okay. So these are some of the animals, amazing animals in the Pacific Ocean. We're going to make an unordered list with a list item. What are some of the animals in the Pacific Ocean? Whales, sharks, and porpoise. Porpoise. Yeah, the U is a typo. Porpoise. That's it, right? I think I spelled that right. Okay, and porpoise. Okay. So there they are. What I want to do though is say I have in my state an array with whales, sharks, and porpoise in it. Porpoises. So instead of writing these three here, we're going to write some code that's going to use this array to make those three LIs. So there's a number of ways to do this, and I'm going to kind of like do one and then refactor it to another and then another, so you can kind of see. So one way, I'm just going to take one of these, I'm going to cut it, I'm going to kill those, and I'm going to say this dot state dot animals. Right, that's my array. That's this array right here. Dot map. Make a function, and so that yields each animal. Right. If I were to just console.log animal here, and that's all. If that's all I were to do here, well, first,
It'd be animal, right?
this dot state. Yes, right here. Yes, thank you. There it is. So it just logs them out. And then I get a warning here saying that it expected a return value here from this. It's like my linter's like, you did something dumb in your code, which is you mapped something and never returned anything. So let's return something. Let's return, and I copied this, so I'm going to paste it back in, and I'm just going to put the animal here. And there it is, right? There's what we had before. We're still logging these. Let's take the log statement out. And there it is. Now, when we had hard-coded these, when React went through and it parsed my JSX code, it's able to internally, as it parses your JSX, identify and keep track of uniquely each element that you wrote down. But when you're using a dynamic array to just like map over and then when it parses that JSX tag, it only sees that LI once when it parses that code. And then it doesn't know if you're going to use it once or 10 times, so it doesn't know how to tell those 10 things apart. If, say, the state changes, how does it know which one to update? Like, which one is the thing that matches up with the thing from the state? So what we have to do is we have to give a unique identifier to these. So right now, the best unique identifier we have actually is the animal name, because whales, sharks, porpoise are all unique. So really, you could just do this. However, a lot of times that's not really an appropriate key, because maybe it's like an object or something like that. So what we do is our map, in addition to yielding each item, yields the index, just like the I in a for loop, 0, 1, 2. So we'll put I here. This is not perfect, but when you don't have something better, it works. And the reason it's not perfect is, let's say our state changed and sharks disappeared, right? So it goes and it removes the thing that had the key 1, but now what has the key 1? Porpoise does, right? It changes. So what it ends up having to do is React's not just able to remove the one thing from the list. It ends up having to re-render everything else that came after that and shift it up because their keys changed. So that's why I is not perfect. If this was coming from a database and you had something like, let's refactor our state here a little bit. Let's say this was an object and it had ID 1 named whales. Oops. ID 2 named sharks. And now ID 3 name porpoise. There we go. Reformatted it for me. That's all fine. So now it's yelling at me, saying I did silly things. We can get rid of I, because instead of using I, we're going to use the animal. Remember, animal is not the string anymore. It's an object. So we're going to use its ID. And here we're going to put its name. This is the best case scenario, because now if sharks gets deleted, we delete the thing with the key 2, but the key for porpoise doesn't change. It's still 3, so it doesn't have to re-render that element. It's not a big deal when you just have 3 little elements like this, but if you have hundreds or thousands of things on the page, you don't want to have to re-render more than you have to re-render. And React will try to be pretty smart about what changes it actually makes in your page. So that's why a lot of people wonder why these keys are required when you're using map. That's what they're for, is there to help React optimize what it has to make changes to. So this is one way. I just wrote this map right in line right here. The more common thing you'll see is because once you drop into JSX, I'm going to move this here a little bigger. Okay. Once you drop into JSX, I don't like to have to write too much JavaScript code in the middle of my tags. I want to try to keep where once I've said return and I start writing my tags in my render function, I want to try to keep that pretty much limited to just JSX tags as much as possible. So instead, what I'm going to put here is a variable called animals. Oops. And up here, right before my return, I'm going to say that animals is equal to, and I just pasted in the same thing that I cut before. So all I did was take that code, and this is what you're going to see the most often with a simple map over some elements. Now, what happens when our data gets a little bit more complex? Like, let's see if we can do this fast. Ooh, that's a bad one. Oh, there we go. Oh, it was just that makes me sad. Okay, so we've got, oh, wrong URL. Let's take that. Okay, so that's an image of a whale. We need a shark. Oh, that's a good one. That's a YouTube thumbnail. Here we go. And then one last one. Porpoise. Porpoise. That one right there?
Oh.
Okay. So here, we're going to say image, and we're going to put that URL in. We're going to get our shark. We're going to say image and put that URL in. And we're going to get our whale. And we're going to put that URL in. I'm going to save it. It's going to reformat my stuff. It's a little bit inconsistent with the formatting, but that's okay. That's just because this one image URL is so long. Okay, anyway, so now we've got an image. So let's say we go in here and we put this in a little h3 tag. Actually, let's do this a little fancier. Let's make a figure tag. Use a fig caption tag to put the name in, and then put an image tag here. And this is where we put our animal.image. And here for the alt, let's be nice to everyone who needs alt text, and say image of. I'm going to switch this to backticks and put animal dot name. Now, because I put backticks here, the only options you have for like alt equals is a string, which is really just shorthand for like foo, right? Then you could just do that. Otherwise, you have to use curly braces. So because I'm using a template literal, I need curly braces around those backticks. Now, if we go back here, cool, right? Let's put a. If we just put a height on them of like 200 pixels, it'll automatically figure out the width. Just make it a little bit smaller so it all fits on the screen. Cool. So there's our. So this component's getting a little bit out of hand now, I think. It almost looks like it should be its own component, right? So I showed you all how to do it in line, how to just do it as a variable right before the render, but at a certain point you're like, wow, that should be its own component. Now maybe it's not such a big component that I feel like it needs its own file. So you can just come in here and say animal. Right? And we'll just say details, and we'll pass it that animal object for the details here. Okay. And we'll come down here, and I'll say const animal. And because this is a simple component that doesn't have any state or anything, I'm just going to go ahead and use the functional syntax for this. And I'm going to say props, I'm going to say return, I'm going to paste in that. Now because I had props here and I said details, then this is each place I have animal here, and we're going to make this a little bit tighter in a second. It's going to be props.details.animal. Except the key doesn't, and this is a mistake I've seen a couple people make, the key doesn't come with this. The key goes directly on the thing you're mapping. So there we go. And we should have no change unless I broke something, which I totally did. Image.
You have to add animal as a
Oh, thank you. You're right. That's a there we go. There we go. So we get the exact same result. Now, this feels a little bit noisy, right? Props.details.animals. So we know that we can pop off details. Let's okay, there we go. So we can do that. That's a thing that we can do with some ES6 syntax. What would even be better is if rather than taking details as an object, what if we just took and passed directly to it image, name. This is a better practice, is just pass the values directly. Image and name, those are the only ones, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll take this, we'll take this, we'll take this, and there they are. Image and name. But if I save this, we're going to get a problem. Those things are going to be undefined, right? Because the object that we passed here, or this, we didn't have an image and name properties, we just had details. So I could do this. Yeah, because this is just key equals value, just like attribute name and value, right? However, this is a really common thing to do. And you've seen how you can use the ... to spread things out, like in an array, and you've seen you can do that with objects. React actually supports using spread for props. So what we can do is we can take this and replace it with ... animal. And it takes each key value pair that's in here, so name, ID, and image, and it says, name equals this thing's got name, animal, or image equals this thing's got image, and it spreads all three of them. We're only going to use two of them, but it's fine that it does the third one, we're just not going to use it. So it makes those three props, these three right here, ID, name, and image, available to the animal component, and makes this component right here ridiculously simple, right? So this is something I like to do when I use these functional syntax here, is remember that if we get rid of the curly braces, that we can get rid of the return, which means we can get rid of the parentheses. Boop. Love that. Look at that. That's just literally, there's some JSX tag, and here's a function that returns it. It is. And we can actually do the same thing right here. So that we'll take this, and we'll make that. So let's zoom out a little bit, close my sidebar so it fits on the screen. So here we have animals equals this.state.animals.map. We're going to map each animal into an animal component. We get the same results over here. This is most often the way I do this. Occasionally, I will pull this right here. Into a method. It's just so I can just say this, the animals here, just to keep my render method nice and clean. Especially if there's some logic that I need to do, like if this dot state dot animals dot length is 0, return no animals found. Sad. Else. This is something I've seen some folks wonder how to do, right? Like let's say our animals hadn't even loaded yet. Like they're coming from an API. No animals found. Sad. That's because there's this. But once we put them in, it would render them.
So to do that, you have to do it as a method.
You don't have to, but I can't write an if right here.
Yeah.
So what I would have to do, you can't write an if statement, but you can actually write a ternary.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is the if is actually multiple statements, and a ternary is just one statement. So I can only write one statement between those curly braces. That's why I can't do an if.
Okay.
But like remember, I don't like to muddy up once I've dropped into JSX. I don't want to write too much code in there. So unless the ternary is like this big on the screen, like, you know, if active, then active, else inactive. Like if that's all it says, then that's fine, right? But if it's a little more than that, which that is, then no way, I won't write a ternary. So, and this is a really common thing. Like maybe you have a loading component and you want to render the loading component there, and it's got a little spinner until the data comes. Let's actually delay this for a second. Let's fake an Ajax call. So after the component mounts, we're going to set a timeout. We're going to wait 2.5 seconds. And we're going to this.setState. And we're going to change the state to be animals, animages. There we go. So no animals are found, sad, and then they pop in 2.5 seconds later. So that's why you would maybe do something like this. Because remember, here's the thing about React, is what you write is, your render function says, given some state, this is what my app should look like. And so I called this animals function, so it says, I'm going to look at the state, if animals like the 0, then it's that, otherwise it's that. And then that's it. That's all I have to think about. It's declarative, right? So then if the state changes by some other means, which is my little callback here that changes the state, then this render gets called again, and this gets reevaluated, and we do something different. So there's that. So I've shown y'all, like I said, a number of ways to use map, including just kind of mapping out a whole other component, or you could put, a little bit of JSX there. Once it gets past more than 1 or 2 tags, I really like to move it to its own component. But like I said, sometimes that component's not really worthy of being called out to its own file. So you can put multiple components, if they're related to each other, together in one file. There's nothing wrong with that. So in fact, maybe at the end of this, I'll show you all the apps that I worked on over the weekend for the hackathon, and I can show you both good and bad things that I did in there. And a lot of them because I was being lazy. I was trying to be quick, and so there's things that I would have organized better if I wanted to take the time to, but I took a few shortcuts, so I can show you all a couple of things that I did that would maybe be a little unorthodox, but save me some time during the hackathon. So that's that. There's animal. Let's look at our, here we go, redundant alt. Alt attribute. Screen readers already announce image tags as an image. You don't need the word image, photo, or picture in the alt prop. Oh. So what if I just say A, whale, A shark, A porpoise. There we go. So let's see. So we talked about mapping. Yeah. Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. So yeah, that's true. Oh, you do have the video as well, but you're right. I should add some comments. And let's also get init, get and get. Cool. It's up on GitHub too. Okay. So let's take what I'll do here is, and I'll say an alternative to return this. I'll just do a little shorthand here. Animals.map animal li end li is to extract to its own component. Cool. Whoops. Well, this has been the curse of my weekend.
I think everybody's weak.
Yeah. Oh man, tell you what, that pay-per-view fight on Saturday night, the cable in there was like bugging through like the whole lead up to the fight. We ended up having to do like, it literally in the minute before the Mayweather fight started, we swapped computers from the Windows computer that kept disconnecting black picture entirely 10 seconds at a time to my computer, which was just like blinking instead. Like the screen would flash white and then go back. And then like twice during the fight it went to static. And it was like unplug the cable, plug it back in, and it came back, and but it was so nerve-wracking. Yeah.
How did you think of the stoppage without a knockdown?
Considering they had said like the rules for that fight would not include that, I don't know. I mean, like the fight was clearly over. Like McGregor at that point was just standing because he was a beast, but he was done.
I think it was Hawk who was telling me that this computer, the 10th round was the lowest payout for a two-day stoppage.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Apparently, Mayweather tried to place a $400,000 bet for himself to win in the 10th round, like with a knockout, and like I guess the MGM Grand, who was like taking the bets on that, like wouldn't take his bet. Like,
Isn't that illegal?
I don't know.
I don't think it's illegal. I think that
It's unethical for sure.
It's convenient for them to not take the bet, knowing that would probably happen. They can refuse a bet.
Yeah, that's what they did.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, Mayweather. Like, I don't know. Maybe you should give this money to your cousin and have him place the bet.
Yeah, right. Just smart.
Anyway, it was a good fight, though. Okay. Yeah, so where were we here? Oh, let's talk about prop types real fast. So there's this interesting thing here that we did by passing these three props here. We've almost kind of obscured, like, well, shoot, what? By looking at this, let's say the definition of animal was in another file. By looking at this, like, oh crap, like now I don't, without going and looking at the source code for animal, I don't know what kind of props animal should take or what type they should have. So React, it used to be built into React, used to have this idea where you could specify the prop types of a component. So what you would do is you would say, this component's prop types, it takes a name, that's a string and it's required, image, it's a string and it's required, an ID, it's a number and it's required, right? People didn't use this feature a lot. It's like half and half. So React ended up removing it from React Core, and now it's a dependency. In fact, let's see if Create React App includes it, and then if it is, I will demo how to do it real fast. Let's just peek in this long folder here. It's just called prop types. And prop types. Cool. Okay. Now what we can do is we can import prop types from React. Oh, sorry, from prop types. Now everything is the same here. It used to just be, and you might see this in older code sometimes, people would import prop types like this. Or just they would say capital R React.prop types. But now, because it's not shipped in the React library anymore, it's shipped in its own, you import it separately like that. So what you might do, if this was a class component, you would come up here and say static prop types equals an object here, or we're going to do what we're going to do for this function down here is we would say animal dot prop types equals, what we can do here is say image, and we're going to access that thing that we imported up here and say string is required, name prop types dot string dot is required, and we're just going to use those two because those are the only two that we're actually using in here. So no problem, our app rendered fine. I'm going to change this delay to be a bit faster. So this worked great, but what if we forgot up here to pass all of them and we only pass name, right? We forgot to pass the image. So the name worked, right? But image was obviously undefined, so we didn't see it. But look at the warning we got in here in our console. Failed prop type. The prop type image is marked as required in animal, but its value is undefined. Which means that if this component was off in another file, or let's say it came from a library that we were using, right? We could find out like, oh, this animal component, I'm using it wrong. I should have passed an image here. And I don't have to go look at the source code for that component. React gives me a warning here in my console that I'm using it wrong. That's where prop types come in. You can write tests that test against the prop types, like does this component work, and it makes sure that you use all the right prop types. But a lot of times it's just validation for us as user. When an app gets really big and we have tons of code all through it, I might use a component and not want to have to go fish for where that component came from, but I still want to know what prop types is required by it, and now React can help us with that while we're coding without having to go do that. Like I said, some people use them, some people don't. When I'm authoring components inside of an app, I find them kind of tedious to use, so I don't. However, if I was a library author and I was creating components for other people to use, I would absolutely use prop types because that would benefit the users of those. So it depends on the situation whether or not you would use them or not. I show them to students typically, and then I say, don't worry about them. Like, I'm not going to expect you to use them in your apps when you're writing your own components for your app. But like I said, if you're writing components that are going to get shared across multiple apps, or they're going to publish in an NPM package or something, you would absolutely use them in that case. So let's switch this back to here. But I'm going to leave them in here in our demo. Move them over here. Let's say get add dash am prop types. Whoops. Oh, sorry, not get add. Get. Cool. Prop types. All right. So CSS. There's been some questions on CSS, and I'm going to talk a little bit about like kind of project organization here too. So this is largely going to be a personal choice, and it's going to be a choice that is kind of dictated by how complex your project is going to be. This is a really simple project, right? So maybe I want to put here background color. Let's get a nice like deep ocean blue. And the color is white on our text. Cool. So we've got this beautiful. Oh God, it's gorgeous.
Ew. It's not
let's just do this. Wow. Style 9. Flex. Content. That's an improvement. Oh. There we go. All right. That's an improvement. So, however, right, these styles here, like let's break this down a little bit more. We have this app, but really this is kind of its own component, right? This is an animals component. So let's make an animals folder in here. And inside of it, I'm going to put an index.js. Oops. And I'm going to say animals. I have a shortcut that just does like this boilerplate for a component for me. Let's just make this a section tag here. And I'm going to paste in this, right? This.animals. Let's go back to app, and we're going to take all of this code that was related to the animals that we did, and we're going to put it in here, in this component. except animal here also needs to come. We're going to just put it here. No joke.
Yeah.
Alright, so here we go. Prop types, oh, prop types is not defined over here in my animals file. Cool. So we're back in business. We have animals over here. Let's go ahead and extract that animal component, right? I'm going to take this little guy here. Export default animal. I do. This line right here. I don't need prop types in there anymore because this one doesn't take any props, but this one will need it right there. So then in here, we're going to need to import the animal component. So what you might realize here is that this styling is related to animals, right? So I'm going to go ahead and take this, and you might make a folder out here called styles and put all of your style sheets in there. Or if you're going ahead and organizing your components grouped together, some people just put everything that's part of that component, JavaScript and styles, images, whatever, they'll put them all in that folder. And that's okay too. And that's just going to depend on personal preference and really how big that project's going to be. Because in a really big project, it might be a good idea to group everything that's related to each other tightly together, because then it's all there, and not when I'm working on the animals component, there's styles here, JavaScript here, images there, right? Maybe they're just all together. So what I'm going to do is in here, I'm just going to say, let's just put index.css. I'll put this in here. And then in my index.js, I'm just going to import this index.css.
So in your main, like your index.css source, it would be normal just to have the body tag.
Just the body and the HTML tag. And if you needed for any reason to style this root element as well, you would put that in there. Other than that, every other style that you add, you could put in its own style sheet for that component if you wanted to. You could also just write a 500-line long CSS file in your index.css. If it was going to get any longer than that, you really might want to start breaking it apart into multiple pieces. Now, you don't have to break it apart into multiple pieces like this either. I'm going to go ahead and commit. And what we're going to do is now make a folder here, import styles. Okay. So now I've got the style sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and move my index.css in there. I'm going to get rid of this test file because we're not going to talk about testing and stuff. And I'm going to move my animals file in here. Of course, the other one's called index.css as well, so I'm just going to rename this to animals. I'm going to move it in here.
Will we ever talk about testing? I mean, I don't know the JavaScript testing.
Maybe in the last couple weeks a little bit with like React testing. That's kind of like an esoteric thing.
Like how do you test CSS?
It's hard. And it's delicate and it's tricky and brittle, and a lot of people just don't. Now in a really big project where there's a lot of money and there's a lot of staff and there's a lot of Q&A, you very well might. And it does happen, it's out there. But on smaller, medium-sized stuff, it's almost not worth the effort.
So on your
Inline style manager, individual components, I know that we were using like header style and like all this
Yeah.
stuff. What line is there that we say this is when I would do this style and this is when I would do the CSS?
That's personal choice.
Okay.
Again, it's kind of like the same thing. I'll do an example of that in a minute. So here, I've moved the CSS, right? So this is no longer here. I would go up a directory, and then up a directory again, and then into styles, and then animal.css. And for this, it's /styles.css. Oops. Oh, did I go up too many directories? Oh, animals. There we go. So, honestly, if you were organizing all your style sheets over here, having to import each one in separately to the components when you've got them all broken out over here is tedious and error prone. So you really wouldn't do that. What you would do is let your your index.js import that main style sheet, and then in here you can actually use the @import syntax. Oops. And Webpack, when it parses your CSS, notice we didn't say URL like we normally would with an importing CSS. We're not doing that. We're just putting that. Webpack will actually go and replace this statement when it builds out. It'll build one CSS style sheet, pulling all the pieces together. That's one of the things Webpack will do for us. So then the only place we ever import CSS into our JavaScript is just that one spot here. And a lot of times I move it down here to kind of separate it from the other import statements. And then inside CSS is that's where I'll worry about all the other CSS imports. I'll just CSS land, and I can organize this directory however I want. It doesn't have to exactly match the components. It might be more high level than the way the components get broken down. Again, it's going to entirely come down to personal preference and how complicated the project is. You have a lot of flexibility here for how you do it, and there's not really one best practice. The most important thing is that you stay organized with whatever organizational system you're using to do those things.
So typically you import CSS today and then JavaScript.
Yep, so neither of these even worry about style sheets anymore. It just goes over here. Now, that said, like Crystal said, we have this whole thing of inline styles, because sometimes I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, here, when I'm looking at this, this is where I want to write the styles for that UL, is right here. If you're going to do that, in the reading, we saw the most simple way to do that, which is to just say style and give it an object here and say like background color, let's do RGBA, and we're going to do white, but at half opacity. And then padding 1. Cool. So if we do that, what ends up happening here is we've inlined the style. In fact, we can even go look and see it here. It's inline there, just like we had written it in HTML. This is okay to do if you're doing this all throughout your app, and that's how you're organizing that app. But you could probably also see how it might get a little tedious, especially when maybe you've got some duplication and stuff. Then again, if you've got some duplication, maybe you should think about making kind of higher level components that solve that duplication stuff. But this is how some people do it. The drawback is every element in the page all has its own little inline styles, right? So there's libraries that solve that for us, like CSS and JS and Radium and stuff, where we write in a style like this, but when it processes our app, it pulls all of it out to a CSS file for us. So we just don't think about that CSS file, we just write these inline styles like that. So that's cool, and that's more of a, that's right, outside of the scope of anything we'll do in class. And but it's out there, so you should be aware that it's there. And sometimes maybe you'll do little one-off styles here. Like maybe you're making it so that when you hover these, they turn red, and you don't want to have to go put those in the big global style sheet. You're just going to write it in line, and you feel like you've got a good reason to do that. That's okay. So, oops. Cool. Let's talk about layouts a little bit. So, say I've got this awesome layout for my app, right? Like, we've got this, and then let's say it's a header tag. And then we've got this footer tag. In there, we've got in copy 2017, the Ocho, all rights. So we've got our thing here. Now what Miguel kind of said about with the router and everything, I'm not even using the app.js anymore. Everything's going in the index.js, and you're wrapping it here around that, putting all your wraps and stuff. Honestly, I'll show you. You can just do that right here in the app. But then it's weird to mix your app and the routes and all of those routes together with like this HTML code that specifies your layout. So you might make a separate layout component. So let's go ahead and do that. Oops, I didn't mean to make a directory. Layout. So what I'm going to have here is like a main tag, and then inside of it I'm going to take all of these things except the animals, right? I'm going to take this, I'm going to cut it, I'm going to put it here in my layout. I'm going to take animals back, and here I'm going to return a layout. I'm going to put my animals in here. So now instead of importing animals, I'm going to import my layout. I'm going to import my animals over here. No. I don't know what happened to the ring bug. What's that? Oh, sorry. I don't need to import my animals here. I still need to import it here. This component, this is where this step props.children comes in. This component, we want to render everything. So let's just leave it as it is. And let's save this as it is. Oh, it's great. There's my layout, but it doesn't have the children of the layout, right? So here's the layout where it begins and ends. And in the middle was supposed to be my animals. So if we go look at our layout, here is where it began and here's where it ended. And in the middle, I wanted the things that I said were children of this component. And that's where this .props.children comes in. And now, Thank you. Okay, so because this is not a class-based component, it doesn't have this. It receives the props as an argument. There we go. Again, I really prefer to do it like this. And not even just pop them off and then from there. There you go. So now here's this really nice layout component. It's only concerned about the layout. What is above and below the main content, what's surrounding it all. It doesn't care what the content is, right? Over here in the app, I'll think about the high level. Here's my high level. So a component is defined but never used. That's an animal.js. Get rid of this little warning here. Oh yeah, we have this import statement up here. But because it's not a class component, we're not using that keyword. Cool, nice and clean. So let's layout. Cool. Boop, boop. Cool. Routers. So we already installed the router in the beginning, right? I think it was, there it is. Okay. So some of you all saw this in the reading, and that's all fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it, where they imported browser router here and then wrapped this in browser router. I don't like to touch this file. This file should have nothing more in it other than react.render app and maybe loading in my global style sheet styles for things that aren't part of the proposal, right? Which in this case really is an entry to all my style sheets, but just that one. This is just a setup file. I will almost never touch this file unless it's like a setup thing for the whole app. Which with Create React App, almost everything's set up for me, so I won't touch this file. So let's go into our app, and so you'll notice also I'm going here to the second line here rather than down here to add a new import. When I think about imports, I think about them in terms of what's the furthest thing away from the code that I'm in now, and I import those things first, and then closer and closer and closer. At a certain point alphabetically, maybe, if I'm really, like, these things are the same distance, so if I was really being nice and tight, I would alphabetize them. But, so that's why I'm going to import this thing that came from a library. I'm going to import it right here. I always put React at the top. So this is from an external library, so it goes at the top, and I'm going to say import browser router from React router. That almost sounds repeated.
That's just
So if I just take browser router here and wrap it around there, all done, right? With setting up that router around my app. So there's nothing else that's going to go between the root and my router. So it doesn't matter if I wrap browser router here inside of app, or if I wrap it outside of app in the other file. What's the difference? Other than I'd like to keep everything starting from app. So I put this here. So we want some routes. We're going to have multiple screens on our app. We're going to have a home page, and then we're going to have our animals page. So let's make a new home page.
There you go. Doesn't like routing like this or speed performance.
No, doesn't make a difference. So here in the layout, here in the app, if I import, import home from, so it's home, there we go. And let's say I would just put it here. Cool, welcome to my fan page. What I want to see is welcome to my fan page, and then I want to link to /animals, and I want to see only the animals. That's my goal here, right? Is have 2 different pages, not just one. So this is where the router helps us. So what we're going to do here is say we're going to import a route, and instead of rendering this home component, I'm going to render a route component. My path is going to be /, and the component that I'm going to render, and I'm going to give it just the name of the component, not a JSX tag that makes an instance of that component. I'm just going to give it the name of that component. The router is going to handle making an instance of it for me, which is why I just type home here, not without the brackets. So if I save that, of course this doesn't change over here, but let's do the same thing for animals. And I know you might already be asking about the is exact thing. So here we are, welcome to my fan page. This is what I expected to see on the home page now, right? Sorry, I'm on animals there in the URL. This is what I expected to see here. And when I go to animals, there's my animals, except I still see welcome to my fan page. I didn't want to see that anymore, right? I thought that when I was on here, I would see animals. What happens is these routes are really kind of more like cumulative, right? So it sees this one, and it's like, oh, like, /, okay, like, I've matched that. And then animals, like, cool, I match / and I match animals. It matches both of them. So, because that's what it's doing. The path is trying to match the URL. And this / and /animals, when my URL is /animals, it matches both of those patterns. So that's where the switch comes in. So you could use this, I think it is exact, right?
Exact.
Oh, just exact? Okay. So I could just put exact here, and great. This went away, and this works. Here's something, though, and this is kind of more of a performance thing. I'm going to go here into React, and let's look at our app. So here's our app. Here's our browser router. And then, so it has a router tag that it injects around our layout. So in our layout, look at that. I see both routes rendered there. There's that, and then here's that. It's just not visible on the page, right? But it's there. I don't need it to be there. I don't want it to be there. I should only see one of them right now. So when you have mutually exclusive routes, where you have a list of routes and you only want one of those things to match, this is where switch comes in. And when we say switch, all I have to do is wrap some routes in a switch. Of course, I could have just typed switch and there we go. And I'll move these 2 lines up into there. And now what's going to happen when I look in here, there's my switch with only the one route. So now if I go to animals, there's that. And if I were to, sorry, I didn't mean to switch tabs. I just meant to move it down a little. So if I were to go inspect here, there's just my animal component in the one. I don't have both those routes being rendered anymore. So that's why you use a switch. Sometimes you're not going to use the switch. You don't have to put all of your routes right here. You can actually have a component that has its own routes within that component deeper down in the thing. And maybe you do want them to be cumulative. Like, you can be as expressive with how you organize these as you want, and the switch just helps you be more expressive by limiting. What's going to happen is it's going to start at the top, and it's going to go down, and it's going to match the first one it sees and not render anymore. So if we had this switch, I'm fairly certain, and I hope I'm not wrong here, and I'll make a fool out of myself. There. Oh, yeah. So this is the problem, right? It matched the first one that it sees that matches. So what you have to do is start thinking about the order. There's the first one that it sees that matches, and then there's that. So I don't want the order to matter, right? So I'm going to go ahead and leave my exact so that I can leave my home page at the top, because I want my home page to be at the top. So I've seen some arguments, and I think maybe it was Garrett or somebody had read an article, and maybe it was even in the reading. Was it an argument for why you would leave exact off and put it at the bottom? I'm not convinced by it. Maybe I should read it again, but I didn't find it very persuasive. And all of the documentation for React Router DOM from the authors of it show doing it like this. The community at large seems to prefer doing it like this, so I'm going to go with that. Right? But again, you know, just it's ultimately up to you and your personal choice, yes. Yeah, so this is pretty common. It used to be that you imported router from React Router, right? And then you like gave it an option here for like the type of router that it used. React Router 4 came out, it changed a lot of things, but people were just used to using a router component, not browser router. So what the practice became was to import browser router, and then you can rename it to as router. Because you know, remember how we talked about the fact that if I pull this in as fooberry, it doesn't matter that I called it animals in that file. I can call this whatever I want in my file, right? And that works. Like this is fooberry, and that's fooberry now. I'm not held bound by what somebody else or even myself in the past named components inside another file, in this file. I can have my own names. That way I don't get things that clash. Like if somebody calls something button, and then something else is called button. I have two different buttons now. How do I specify which button I meant? It doesn't matter. No variables in other files. The whole purpose of these import-export files, or I say half the purpose of these import-export files, is to make it so variable names can't collide anymore and overlap each other. It's called shadowing, and that leads to bugs. So the thing is, though, when we use this destructuring syntax with the curly braces to pop things off of whatever this exports, right? So the React library exports the React object that has a property on it called component. But if I use this destructuring thing here, I can just pop component off it and just call it component. Except component is what it's called in React, right? What if I wanted to pop the thing off of it but not call it what it was called in that file? The import syntax, that's what as lets me do. So I could say import component as compopo, right? So then over here, I would say compopo, and it's the same thing. So whenever you're using the curly braces, you're bound. Without as, you're bound by the name that file is exporting it as, but you can rename it in your export. So that's all that is, and that's a pretty common thing. I see this import browser router as router more often than I just see import browser router. So I'll leave that here. I'm going to take compopo and fooberry back to those, though, although I kind of like compopo. Don't worry, it's immortalized in the video forever. Okay. So there's, did write layout up here when you asked about layout, I think. I don't know if that was there or there. Elaborate on the project structure with routes. Did I kind of answer what question you had about that?
Yeah, just like where you could put routes.
Anywhere. Sometimes it makes sense to do like top level routing here, but what about down in the animals component? If the animals, like each animal had a details page, I could list all those out here, like animals, / details, and then maybe like more. Like I could keep doing all of these things, but then I'd be drilling down into components that are probably buried in that animals folder, right? And then I'd have to import like a whole bunch more components up here, and then my app file gets really unwieldy. So you don't have to do that. You can just say that like animals is a base route here into this component, and then down in that component, when you're rendering, you can actually render other routes in there. So maybe the animals component has like a left sidebar with all the images, and when I click on one of them, it sub-renders another route with details for one of the animals. Like that's a thing you could do. So it doesn't have to happen all up here. But this is the most common sort of like basic switching between whole pages. Like I said, you have sub-pages too.
Can you
Like-
like mix the switch and non-switch kind of stuff in there? Kind of thought that's key with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Like make that work. Because sometimes you may look at people that effectively.
Yep. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't, and that's why you can use the switch or not use the switch.
So within the same like layout, could I have non-switch?
Yeah, like you can put a route right here, outside of it, outside of the switch. What the switch just says is all of the routes that are listed inside of me, I'm only going to render the first one that matches, right? So it makes the list of routes mutually exclusive, like a switch statement. It's like saying, so take this URL, do this or this or this or this. Whereas if you left it out, it would be like, if this matches, do this. Else, well, not even else if, just if this matches, do this. If this matches, do this. And you could theoretically have all of them match or none of them or some of them. So, cool. This router here, yep, just one time. And that's why you put it on the whole app, because what it does is it makes the whole route system available to everything. It's like a provider for all of it. Okay, whoops. I think we didn't. I just committed, right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's link and navlink, right? Because right now on my home page, I don't have a way to link to my animals page. So in my layout, I'm going to add some navigation for my site. So up here in the header, I'm going to make a nav tag, and I'm going to make let's import link from React router.
Does that have to be done?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. I wish I had a hotkey to open these back up when Prettier closes them for me. Okay, so I'm just going to make a link here, and we're going to link to the home page, and I'm just going to say home. And I'm going to make another link, and I'm going to link to animals, to /animals. And then I'm going to go over here to my styles, and I'm going to say in the header there's a nav whose display is flex, and I'm going to justify content space between, and whoops, space around. And I'm also going to say that in the header nav, the A's, if they're a link, or they're visited, so that they don't turn purple like they are right now, that their color is going to be, I'll just, let's get a nice creamy color. There we go. Okay. So here's our navigation. We're on the home page, and we click on animals, and then there's animals, and we can go back to the home page. Perfect. That's what links are supposed to do, right? Now that I'm on my animals, though, I want to style that one differently than home, so I know which page I'm on, right? Normally, the way you do that is you put like a current or active class on the one that you're on. That's a really, really common thing to do. Now, I could go write the code around here like, if the URL is /animals, then add this class name to this thing. It would suck to have to do that every time I wanted to do that. So React Router has that functionality built in. So let's inspect. We're going to inspect this one right now. So you see, it says A, href /animals, A. That's all that is, right? It's just an anchor tag. Let's switch this out for navlink. Oops, I put a J in. We'll switch that out for navlink, and then look at it. Row. They're both active. Poo. I saw this. There's a issue open for it that it doesn't respect the exact. Oh, can you put exact on here? Yeah, that's what it is. You didn't used to be able to do that. So here, you got the ARIA current for accessibility stuff, but then more importantly, you got the class active on this one, but not the other one. Let's switch. You see them switch? Mm-hmm. So now let's use that in our styles, right? No, that's just, I could if I was just if I wanted to use that to match in my style, but the class is fine enough. Oh, and sorry, it's active, not current. So what I'm going to do here is make the background color. Let me just borrow this, and then make the color be the background color of the page. I'm just going to invert it. Cool. So now we're on the home page, now we're on the animals page. And I was only able to do this so easily by just adding styles for active because I use the navlink. That's the only difference between link and navlink, is that navlink will add the ARIA current and the class active for the routes you're on. That's it. So if you're doing navigation, use navlink. If you're just making a link to another page, just use regular link.
Because you don't have to use this. You can use it on the same thing. Because I put active style and I added color to it.
Yes.
And each one would have that style and select it. Or
yes, you can do that instead of just putting on the nav link. There's a couple extra props that it takes that let you. You can specify a different class name other than active to use. Like let's say you wanted it to be current. Or you can specify some CSS that will apply if it's active. Instead of just saying style, you can say active style. Yeah. So, and those are all in the docs for it. Nav links. Cool. Boom. So, matching. Cool. Let's make a details page for each animal now. Go ahead and do that. So here's the question. Do we want the details page to be mutually exclusive, or do we still want this menu of animals at the top? Okay. So what I'm going to do then, and I haven't done this in a while, so I might fumble on it. Yes? Uh-huh.
When you put it here,
yep.
Just show it here.
Yep, that's what I'm going to do. That's exactly it. So what we're going to do is let's go here to our animals, our animal, and let's import, and this is going to be a nav link as well. So I'm going to have whatever animal we're on be selected. So I'm going to import nav link from React router DOM, and in this around here, actually around the whole thing. Nav link, and let's move these up into here, 2, and then where we're going to go, I'm going to use backticks here, to animals slash the name of the animal, 2 lowercase. So now these are links, so we mouse over to animal slash whales, to animal slash sharks, to animal slash porpoise. So when we click, cool, right? There they are. Let's check out our, see the URL changing? Let's see if our navlinks thing is working. Current, sharks, there we go. This part looks great. Let's style those a little bit. Let's go to animals.css. Let's see, okay. If you are, let's see, the figure with the dot active, I'm going to style the image, and I'm going to put a border thick, solid, white on the active one. There we go. Now, I don't like the way they jump. See how they jump? So what we're going to do is on all of the figure images, we're going to put a border. This is a little trick here. Thick, solid, but I'm going to make it transparent so you can't see it. Nice. Let's also style our links down there. Figure a link, and I think if I just do a link and tell whether they're visitor, maybe I don't have to specify visit unless I want it to be different. Color, white, text decoration, none. Maybe I do have to visit it. Cool. Works for me. Although they don't, I don't know if they look like something you can click on. Now, I'll worry about UX stuff later. So we've got this part done. What we want to do now is render a component with animal details inside of there, where appropriate, right? So let's make a new file called details.js. For now, let's just do details. Let's get fancy and make an article tag. Oh, I know. Doing info about name. So how's this gonna work? Where's the name gonna come from? We'll figure that out in a minute. We're gonna figure all that out in a minute. Info about some animal. I'm gonna write this. Okay. So down here, right, this is where we render the animal. This is it. Okay. So down here, we figure all of these, and down here under this list, I'm going to make a route. So let's import route from the router. Import route. React router DOM, not Tom. And down here, I'm going to make a route. Path is going to be /animals. And then here is we're going to use a variable, is a colon, just like we did in Node, when we did the routing in Node. And we're going to say so a lot of times, so notice I did the 2 down case of it. So the name is Wales with a capital W. But let's say, let's call these instead, where is it? Let's call these blue whales instead, right? Is that a blue whale in the picture? Here, let's do something that I know. That's a white shark, great white shark. Okay, so great white sharks. So when I link to it, notice I just downcased it. Look how terrible that looks in the URL. The %20 is replaced with the spaces. So what I'm going to do is, instead of when I click on an animal, just 2 lowercasing it, I'm going to do a .replace, and I'm going to use a little regular expression where I'm going to match anything that's not A through Z or 0 through 9. I'm going to replace that with a dash. So now, and I got to put a G here to do a global replace, so it doesn't do more than just the first one. There we go. Great white sharks with hyphens, right? So that idea of taking a title and making it appropriate for a URL, we call that a slug. So that's the slug for this, right? So a lot of times what you'll do when you're, what's that? Yeah, I'm going to show you right here. I'm going to call it the slug right here. That's the slug. So now, when we're in details here, how do we know which animals' details to show, right? Let's finish our, that's our route. Oh, we got to do the component. So the component that we're going to render is the details component. So let's import details from /details. So if we were to just, oops, we can close these. Okay. So if we go home and we go to animals, right, there's our animals. If we click on one of them, now we're supposed to see details about that animal, right? Make sense? And that's how kind of this subroute worked. Like, it didn't match, and so we didn't see info about some animal down here until we added the part to the URL that matched it, right? Like foo. And then there it is down there. So how do we get this thing, foo, so that we can look up the details for animals wherever we're going to look it up? I don't know where we're going to look it up yet. I haven't thought that far ahead. But I do know that we need to figure that out. So let's start by just rendering that slug down here, info about, and we'll put the slug there. So similar like in React, in Node, sorry, I'm jumping around all willy-nilly here. Details, this is what I'm looking for. Similar to in Node, we did request.params, I think, and then the name of the thing. What we have is any component that's rendered directly by a route, which when I say directly by a route, I mean, sorry, it was this one. This details component was rendered by the route. This route, and we can verify this by looking in here, gets 3 props added to it by the router. So let's go in here, dig down, animals. There's our route. Here's our details. These 3 props, history, location, and match, these were provided because this is wrapped in a route. There's a way to get those if you're not directly wrapped in a thing, and I'll cover that when it comes up, but it's not that common. Yes?
Those are analogous to like body forensic theory from
I guess so. I guess so. As close as like this can get analogous to. What this has is information about the routing itself. So it has information about the location. This is just the URL. This is literally, there's the path name. If we had hash like, you know, poo up there, well there it is. There's the hash after that part of the URL. And if you had something like this, well, actually I think this might be supposed to go after that, right? Oh crap, I gotta dig down. There it is. So there's the search part, there's the hash part, and then there's the path name part. So that's all that is. That's just helpful stuff about the location that I'm currently on. The history, this is the thing that keeps track of, as we click through here, notice that the browser never reloads the page. The URL changes and the pages that we're on change, but also I can use my back button to navigate through everything I was just doing with my back button. That history object keeps track of that, contains information about my history. It also has useful methods like push. So this.history, or this.props.history.push, that's how I can, without clicking on a link, force myself to navigate to another page. So maybe you do that while you're filling out a form or something, right? When you hit submit, rather than reloading the page, you didn't have a link that somebody clicked on, but you can push onto their history to alter the history. That's what that's for. The other part, that last part, is the part that we care about right now. That's the match. So is exact. Yep, that's an exact match. Here's the path that we matched. Here's the URL that it was. Now look at this params object. Oh, there it has. The slug was replaced with porpoise. So here's the way that we can get the value of what the slug is. So here in our details component, we can say props.match.params, and it's a mouthful, but .slug. So info about porpoise, info about great white sharks, info about whales. Yay. So let's just pretend, I don't know, that this stuff was in an API, but it's not. So we're going to make a thing up here. It's an object. And it's going to have porpoise. And let's real fast here. Porpoise. There's the info for a porpoise. Let's look up great white shark. Oh, it didn't even give me a full sentence. Here we go. I'm going to copy this whole douche. Okay. And then I'm going to use quotes around this key because you can't put hyphens in the syntax without quotes, but it works just the same to do it like that. Thank you. This is what I get while I'm typing and talking. And then we had whales. Just put people with too much Bitcoin. It's a Bitcoin joke. Sorry.
That's my full-term baby.
You're talking like it actually in any kind of financial market, like people that are trading that have like ridiculous amounts of money to trade with. These are usually people who have so much money that they can actually influence the market price itself by selling a bunch or buying a bunch. They have so much that they can move the price. We call them whales. Like they're displacing large amounts of water. Also in gaming, like like if you have a company that has like a free-to-play game, but there's like those little things with the micropayments. Like for 99 cents, you can get this. For 50 cents or a quarter, you can get this. And you wonder, like, how do these people really make any money? Because I sit here and I play Farmville all day and I don't spend a dime, right? Those companies make like 90% of their revenues from what they call whales, which are like rich people who play those games and have no problem dumping thousands of dollars into like a little mobile game. Those people exist, and those companies exist solely because those people exist, and those people spend ridiculous amounts of money in those games. So it's weird because it creates this whole thing where those game designers have to like cater to those type of users, which makes them make not good games for regular people, and it's a whole mess. But anyway, let's actually look up whales here and get a little short thing on whales. So here's some info. So what we're going to do is, actually, let's make this an object. Let's make this info, and then name, again, is going to be whales are huge. This is an object. This is info. Actually, let's call this the title. Title is sharks are awesome. That one gets an exclamation mark. And whales. The info is that, and the title is, oh, wrong title. Not dolphins. Will I do what? I do, yes, right here and here. I was just checking the ends of the lines down as well. Okay, so, except I forgot one. Purposes. I checked that. Oh, that one. There we go. There we go. So now down here, what we can do is we can go into details. And we can get the props that match. I shouldn't have deleted it. I just did. Params.slug. So that slug is the key that we're going to look up here in our object. And I'm going to put the dot title here, and then I'm going to make a paragraph, and I'm going to do the same exact thing, but the info. Whoops. Very property title identified. Great white sharks. Great white shark. Sharks. And whales. There's our cool app. There's our home page. There's our animals. Pretends like it's an API by loading them slowly. And you can see we can even navigate using a subroute around in here. In a real app, I'd probably organize where I got these details from a little bit better, but either in a different file or probably, like it'd probably come from a database or an API or something. And that elaborates on that. In one app! What? Cool.
The other class members, why you guys always Jason, did you mind posting the video on the React channel, or do you just do it on
I will upload it and then I will drop the link in Slack as well. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna get that upload started right now. So let me